How do you interview someone for a podcast? A great interview can position you as an expert in your field, but it can also create great content. And on the other hand, a really bad interview can go horribly wrong, like that. In this video, I'm going to show you how to stand out as an interviewer, the dirty secret behind good interviews and bad interviews, and the biggest mistake I see new interviewers making and experienced interviewers making that you have got to avoid. For this and more, stay tuned. Alright, let's start out by talking about the things you need to do before you start going out there for your interviews. What you're going to do is collect the names of the people who you would like to interview, and you're going to go out there and research everything you can about them. The biggest difference behind a really great interview and one that is mediocre or worse is the amount of research that the interviewer has gone into, the amount of familiarity that researcher has with the topic they are engaging with that expert. So when you're interviewing someone, when you're preparing for that interview process, what I want you to do is research as much as Wikipedia will give you, and then more. I want you to know about their products and their services. What are their passions? What are they putting out there on their different social platforms? Get an understanding of what they're doing with their business right now and where they might be going in short term and in long term, so that you can create and craft questions and create a story arc within your interview that leads them to be able to highlight things that they're excited about. This is going to position you as an expert in the interviewing field because you're allowing for the opportunities to shine those spotlights on your experts. They feel like they're able to give your customers more value, give your listeners more value, while also serving their own needs on your interview, which is really awesome. So you give that top of the mountain, I've achieved things, I'm the attractive character vibes, but you're also giving that relatability by having that back and forth banter, and that comes from familiarity with the subject matter. So go out there, immerse yourself in that person's world. A great example of really great questions because of good, deep research would be the show Hot Wings. This guy, I totally forget his name, but he interviews people, celebrities usually, while they eat hotter and like progressively hotter wings. And it's a great format that gets people get your viewers and your celebrities into this relatable conversation mode, like you're just hanging out with your friends eating wings. But it also, his questions are probably, I would say he's probably one of the top 10 interviewers in the entire world, just based on the depth of research he does. And because of that, he provides incredible value in those conversations. Sometimes he even catches his interviewee off guard with how deep of knowledge he has on the subject, and that is pretty freaking cool. So try and aim for that. And if you guys have other examples of fantastic interviewers out there, definitely drop the links in the comments. Let us know in the comments. I love to collect ideas and examples of fantastic questions and interview formats, different banters back and forth. I love interviews, everything interviews. So let's drop those down in the comments so we can have that conversation. We can check out what you guys are enjoying. Going off of that, you also need to remember that we have to model what's working out there when it comes to style and format of your questions. So not every interview is done in the same style. We have interviews that might be a lot more formal, like you would have with the president or the prime minister, where there's protocol to follow. Or you might be more laid back and more casual and chill, but still have that same level of authority, kind of like Oprah does, for example. Or maybe you have a completely different, off-the-wall kind of quirky type of interviewing, like I like to think I have sometimes. Like my favorite interviewer in all of Canadian history was on the Canadian version of MTV. We call it Much Music. His name was Nardwar, and he would interview every kind of musician, bands like punk bands to rappers and hip hop artists to jazz musicians and everyone in between. And he has his character getup that he would wear, and he would have these signature phrases and moves and actions and behaviors while he interviewed that didn't take away from the interview themselves, because his level of research and familiarity with the subject was so deep. He could have these so casual, bounce off of each other type of interviews, off the cuff style interviews, while also maintaining that quirkiness that his audience came to know and love and expect from him, which I think is pretty fantastic. And talking about fans and communities, I want you guys to join the visibility hacking movement, and all you have to do today is hit that subscribe button, because every week we release new videos and I want you guys to check them out. I want you guys to be the first to find out about them and the first to come watch them with us, so we can implement these skills together and start taking over the world with our businesses and our movements. The final thing that you need to keep in mind is how the depth of questions you ask. And we talk about depth of research, but we also need to look at the depth of questions and how we're formatting and structuring the questions that we ask. If we want to get really deep and intimate with the person that we're interviewing, we can't expect to ask those types of questions right at the beginning of the interview. So a great way to think about your interview process is to think of it in different steps along a journey. And at first, you want to have questions that build rapport and build the language. So these are the kinds of questions that are going to be really easy to answer. These are the kinds of questions that your interviewer might have already expected to answer. Kind of the questions that everyone asks. And we do this because we need to set the tone. We need to make sure that the person we're interviewing is comfortable with us. They're not nervous about what's going on. All the sound levels and all of that have been checked, but now we're just getting comfortable with each other. So ask a few questions, not throwaway questions necessarily, but questions that are a little bit easier to answer. Then move into the next phase where you're going to start getting a little bit deeper. You can quicken the pace of your questions, or you can start stretching out the speed of your questions and the length of time between your questions to allow to open up the space for longer answers. And make sure that you're also asking open-ended questions. Don't ask questions that can be simply answered with yes or no or maybe or a shrug. You want questions that are going to elicit a deeper answer. Deep is the word of this video, that's for sure. So drop that in the comments below. But also, I want you guys to think about how broad your questions are. When we're thinking about these three phases of questions within our interview, we have the broadest questions which are going to be at the beginning. They start to open up the space, lots of space to answer questions. And then that middle phase, we start to tighten that scope. We start to pick out what we really want to get at in this interview. What are the things we want to point out that have been brought up in that rapport building phase that we want to get deeper into? And then in that final phase of the questioning, that's when we really want to go deep, deep, deep. We really want to poke at those pain points. We want to get more intimate with our questions. So let's use some examples. On one hand, you could be, say you're a marriage counselor or you're a marriage therapist or a couples therapist. You work with couples. Of course, you're going to start with really broad questions about how people are doing and what brought you here today. And by the time that you get to phase 3 in your questions, you're going to be having some open levels of intimacy with each other in the sense of questions and answers that may not have been very popular to answer usually. And remember, you're doing all of this on a podcast, so we remember that there is an audience there at the same time. So while you have the responsibility and the expectation to make really great content by going through the different levels of questions, you also want to make sure that you're respecting the boundaries of your guest. We want to make sure that we aren't overstepping in any areas that are our guest may not want to discuss. So the way that you prepare for that is simply to have that pre-chat at the beginning before you start building rapport formally in the interview section. You want to start building rapport casually before you press record. And in that area, you're definitely going to be asking at least the one question of, is there any area you don't want to talk about? Simple. So that's it for those big tips, and I got more for you, but we've run out of time, my friends, so you're gonna have to check out the link down below for the Visibility Hacking Secrets training. It's a really cool vault that we've built out that has a bunch of trainings that'll help you level up your influence, your authority, and your income online. So check that out down below, my friends. You're going to enjoy it. And you also may enjoy one of these videos. I think you'll like one of them, and I think the algorithm tells me you're gonna like the other one, so you're guaranteed to enjoy something.